Good morning, traders, and a happy Wednesday out there to you all. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there and are all ready for this nice day in front of us here, our Wednesday. Back in full action here. We have the Europe markets back in order here, so we have that to take into account. And as far as our economic calendar goes today, we are nice and light on the board. Really, for the U.S. side of the equation, all we have is a Richmond Manufacturing Index at the top of those first 30 minutes after the pit session opening, so at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And then outside of that, really light on the board there. But with that said, just good to make note of that. And then slowly but surely, as we well know, we'll be getting closer towards the last trading day of the month as well as the last trading day of the year there. So that's going to be taking place there on Friday. So as we get closer towards that point, good to make note of. And then with that said, we'll want to come over here and scale up our daily chart on the S&P. We know yesterday we were able to, at the end of the day, get the look above the high that we had from the trading on the 20th. We had been trading 2.5 days inside of that range expansion bar that we had to the downside, so we were able to look above briefly the 4830.75. So even though we took it out, it will still be of good value for our trading during today's action. Then of course the previous day's high, when we took out 48.30.75, we put in a high of 48.34 half. So previous day's high, of course, would also be of good value for us. And all else aside, not doing half bad as far as maintaining and holding their ground. 5 SMA, quite a ways down below. It comes in at 4,800 even, so I'm doing a fairly good job, as we could see in the overnight session. Nice and contained, upper end of our previous day's range there. So not really too much to fault on behalf of the S&Ps in particular when looking at the daily display. We know where we stand, basis our S&P cash, if we want to take that into consideration as well, should we, get any type of a further extension going in here for us. Like we said, we will be slowly getting closer towards last trading day of the month and last trading day of the year, so the S&P cash just kind of helps normalize things because we don't have to worry about the rolling of the contract. So of course, since it is the cash market there is still a premium baked in there. So basis the cash, we have 48.18 as the full swing high or full test up on the weekly cash S&P, and we settled yesterday 47.75 around that zone. So little premium up against where we closed yesterday in basis the futures, but still on balance, good to know where we stand on the S&P cash. So that's a little bit bigger picture. And then for our purposes here intraday, looking over at our 120-minute display, first off, we can see the nature in which our slow line was doing some corrective activity without giving up any type of significant ground. We've been working on slightly higher spike or cycle lows along the lines here with something like the ES. And as we know, same idea really as what we were looking at on the daily chart. It just took us a little extra time. It took us 2.5 days to fully recoup the damage that we had done to the ES. So once again, we looked above the 48.30.75, and then all we have marked off here is the high that we made from yesterday, right? Just 4 points above that. So 48.34.50 would be the previous day's high to bear in mind. And so far, not giving up too much ground here as far as the consolidative activity here on the 120-minute display. And then bigger picture, of course, we'd be looking at the weekly display of data on any type of further reaction should we start to get above that previous day's high. But for now, one step at a time, trading at the upper end of the previous day's range with a fairly narrow overnight session there, or Globex range. And then moving on along here, we also have the DAX. If we blow up the DAX for one or scale it out, we can see we've been going through very constructive, prolonged, positive consolidation after having large standard deviation move to the upside. So we've been doing this, but essentially, as opposed to giving up much ground, what we've started to see is just some contraction in the range or some price bar overlap. So in comparison here to our ES for one, if we look at the bar from the 20th here, this was the same composition we had in the ES up until yesterday, where we started to take out the bar from the 20th. However, in the case of the DAX, here we're still trading inside of that range bar from the 20th there. However, nice round figure there. 17,000 is the top of that previous bar there. So, as far as the reference point up above, we would have 16,999, or just call it 17,000 there. As point of interest up above in the case of the DAX. And on the intraday basis, like we said, they weren't trading yesterday, so they had their reopening, and they had a small gap up, pretty quick to fill that gap from the reopening as well. And more or less, it's going to give us the same feel here. The hourly charts, just prolonged positive consolidation here. We did put in a slightly lower low after having some testing here on the DAX, but as you can see, they've been doing a pretty good job of thus then, defending the point. If I were to grab this chart, scale it up just a notch, and grab our little tools here, our little drawing tools. So we came down, obviously made the full retest, so we had one lower low. Then we proceeded to come down and then held, higher low, and then slowly have been trying to materialize and improving this just a notch there. But as we can see, it hasn't gone, running away with it. This is going to be that same 17,000 figure there in the case of DAX. Should they reach up any further, it's a visible spike high that one could consider there in the case of our DAX. So we'll shrink this one back up here, grab our little lower handle there, and yeah, it's pretty much nicely coinciding there with the daily display, just digesting some of that prolonged progress it had made to the upside there. Then moving on along here, we have the euro currency here in the mix as well. Sure took its time there yesterday, getting up there to the previous day's high, but we did get up there before the end there. So we proceeded to eat the tail during yesterday's trading, which is perfectly fine in the case of the EC. So nice extension, also very important. We'll look at the dollar index in just a moment, but we were able to close above the 1.107 from November 29th. It should be. Let me just get you that here. Yep, November 29th. So that was our cycle high that we had done some testing around the previous 2 days. And then as we can see, overnight, at least initially here, getting some better acceptance above that point. So we can see this has been the activity during the overnight session. Fairly steady in the case of the euro currency. What we might want to note is that we have been up in both the Asia and the Europe session, so we'll be on guard. We don't have any signs of loss of momentum or sell divergences forming as of yet, but we have carried the ball from Asia and the Europe morning, so we'll keep an eye just in case we do see any signs of pausing or any type of rotational activity going into our US morning. But all else aside, nothing to fault on it. Not saying that it looks bad, it's just a matter that it's carried itself quite nicely from the overnight session, maintaining itself also above the 1.1 handle fairly well. And so we'll see. For now, like we said, if we go out here to the 30, 60, and 120 minute data, no signs of sell divergences or loss of momentum on the oscillator, so it would be more so keeping an eye to see if we get any type of rotation and perhaps even form additional continuation patterns. So that's where we are with the euro currency. Not quite on the extended run because we know we did have our close back below the 5 SMA here on the 20th, so good persistency of trend, but not quite that same feeling as the extended run as we've had in some of these other groups. But with that said, also, just to bring this one back up in the site as well, note the trading that we're doing, just getting our first time closing above the November 29th bar basis the euro currency. However, here on the dollar, very significant as well. Here's that same bar from the 29th, and we've been having numerous closes well beneath that point in the case of the dollar. So the dollar showcasing some good underlying weakness here, and the fact that we had kind of the similar idea yesterday. We had the inside range bar, worked on eating the tail. We didn't fully take out the tail, but as we can see overnight, we were able to slip down and put in a nice lower low. So dollar remaining under pressure, and you could keep an eye on it. 101.075 was the 2-day low there that we came very close to breaching yesterday, but held. So we took that out then in the overnight session. So we're kind of trading at and around the previous 2-day low in the case of the dollar index. But I still think this is an important view, especially if watching the euro currency. As we know, these typically go inverse against each other. And if we want to get out here and get a little more fancy, you can always go out basis the continuation contracts, and just like how we looked on the weekly charts, basis the cash and everything. As we come down any further here in the case of the dollar index, basis the continuation pattern, so the price figures aren't going to be necessarily quite exact. But any further on this approach here, you start to get a little closer here towards this big test reject or V-shaped bottom that we had from the summer months earlier on in the year. So for now, some good progress on the dollar. We don't have to get too far ahead of ourselves, but just noting the fact that it is kind of important to note since it has been kind of leading a bit compared to that of the euro currency. So that is that. And then moving outside of our currency group there, we have the gold next in the queue. I'll shrink this down, kick things off with our daily bar. We had the inside bar in the gold yesterday, although they certainly came very close, no doubt, to trading to the previous day's high. That was at 2083, and we kept it just a notch beneath that, so we put in a nice thick inside range bar, but good low to high activity still as far as the gold goes. And then overnight, so far we've come close, but no banana yet on trading to the 2083 there, just from being the tail from 2 days ago that we had left there in the gold. So, of course, that's going to be a nice point of interest there. Down below, in case we loosen up at all, we have all of the previous day's range to service, nice congestion zones. 5 SMA is a little bit ways down there, 2065, but just like the euro currency, not really seeing many signs of sell divergences or anything that is on the questionable side on the gold. About the only thing that would stick out to me here on the intraday basis is the fact that we had our high test of 2083 and we worked on retesting it and have been falling a little shy. So if we fall shy, we could get a little bit of the kind of U-turn type of feeling. But really, the caution mark doesn't really come in until 2063 in the case of the gold. So for now, holding their own, right? 2083 is going to be our kind of level to watch in the early morning there. See if they're going to, go for a test of that or fall a little bit shy as they have been doing. And then we'll keep an eye. But we do have the inside range bar coming into the session here, so it is in a little bit of a balancing mode coming into today. So far, nice, contained overnight, but mildly positive and holding most of the progress that we had from yesterday's trading basis the GC. So 2083 is the 2-day high or the top of the tail that we had left there in the gold. But definitely one to keep tabs on there today. And then we have our crude next in order here. Also not a bad mover. A little different than the gold though. For one, here we'll kick this off. Just the same idea here as looking at the daily display. Got to give them credit, as we know. Filling in most of these blanks from our blue zone here, from our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red bars down. Took some nice time, spent some price bar overlap, filling in this region, 75.37 down to 72.14. So we take that same zone, drag it over to the right. We've been putting in some good work there. However, what we did see yesterday is some good action in the crude. We saw an outside up bar. In other words, we took out the previous day's low, closed above not only the previous day's high, but also the previous week's high. So crude really showcased some nice activity there yesterday. However, what we haven't seen as of yet is any trade closer towards the previous day's high up there. That's at 76.18 in the case of the crude, and on balance, the outside up bars have better testing abilities there to get closer towards the tail or test towards the previous day's high on the following day. Which so far we haven't really seen that be the case there in the crude. We're still keeping it inside to compare to yesterday's activity, and as we blow up our 120-minute display, of course, some of this taking place in the early morning session. All we're seeing here is our nice impulse up that we had during yesterday's trade, right? Steady, that's the outside up component. We had our pull back, granted, this was forming overnight, so this was pre-morning session. We had our little push back up, so our flag formation and partial retest, but no full go here. So now what we have taking place is either one, failure test on the hourly crude for the full test up, or you could view this as being a nice A, B, C type of rhythm. And drum roll, this is going to be one that shows up awfully nice on the market profile display because, as we'll see in a little bit more detail from Damon's charts there, but we're filling in some of the blanks from yesterday's impulse bars to the upside. So we've had a few instances of this here in the crude. Has a nice habit of getting good efficient moves. So, good impulse up yesterday. More of a complex correction to fill in some of the blanks there from yesterday's advancement on the crude. If you want to get a little more fancy, you can dial it down to even a little bit of a lighter time frame, such as the 15-minute display. It's going to show that same kind of idea, right? Single time framing. Our pull back, bit of the lower high, and then our push down. This is kind of in the early morning session, but point being, we're filling in or filled in some of the blanks here from yesterday's advancement on the crude. So we'll keep tabs on it there. We'll watch kind of the hourly charts there or the 30-minute data and see how they trade inside of that previous day's range. And then when we see the MP display, we'll note that we've done some filling in. Doesn't look like we did a complete fill in the crude, but certainly looks like they gave us a partial testing. So we'll want to keep watch on that. And then we have the bonds here, and the bonds, as we know, well, had been holding their own for certain. Nice and tame during their trading yesterday. Formed their balancing act at the top of the swing. So, interestingly, it's always a little skewed with the holidays and such, but we had been making some nice progress here on the bonds. Not quite the major extended run, but we had our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 closes above, kind of a close beneath, but also in the backdrop of a 3-bar balance mode. So, initially here in the bonds, we could see that we're working on. It's in the early morning session, so we'll see. We still got the full day in front of us here, but 124.30, the high test there from the previous week's trading. So that is perfectly fine, full retest up. They're just coming out of the balancing act. It's always tough to, see which direction they're going to be coming out of at these points, but all else aside, we've been maintaining ourselves in a fairly good uptrending market. And drum roll here, so 124.30. High test on the 120-minute charts or the dailies. But, well, we also have, you guys know I like keeping an eye on the yield displays. In today's case, we'll pull over the intraday yield here so we can kind of see where we are opening here basis these 30-year yields. We opened at 4.001% basis these 30s. So, a bit of the round figure, good to know. We have been having a whole lot of trading around that point on this yield display as of late. However, we haven't really been closing on the other side of it. We've had numerous tests, this yellow line here, essentially serving as that 4% handle. Let me see if I can get a little bit more exact. There we are. So several tests, we came close here on the 15th, we traded through it on the 20th, closed above, traded on it on the following day, closed above it briefly, and, continuing on with that theme, right, those 3 days we traded all around and opened all around that 4% handle and just couldn't quite close there. So we'll see how that pans out here today. We'll see if they try to get this thing going at all. The bottom of this little zone here on the yield charts comes in at 3.977. As you can see, we have a bit of a gap here. Maybe just from the early morning session from yesterday's close, since the bonds were very tame yesterday. So inverse the bonds as the bonds trade up outside their Kellner channel, basis the 30s and the 10s. That's reflective with some down movement in the yields, and in this case, they're trading at and around the round figure of 4% there. And then just for kicks here, these are the on the Europe side of things here. These are the Bunds, right? So they also pretty steady. Also had their balancing out coming into the session here today. And range expansion at the top of the swing here with the Bunds, though. They are also working on persistency of trend. So we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yesterday being day 8. And so far, I'm looking likely that they might be trying to work on day 9. So Bunds a little stronger than our U.S. fixed income, but good extension at the top of the swing. And we will watch these bonds and see how our U.S. bonds, that is, and see how they trade around that 4% handle. And with that said, without any further ado, we got our charts loaded back up here for us. We'll have Damon M here shortly, and like we said, we'll have a couple nice zones here. This is got a couple markets that will look quite interesting there, or quite helpful, if you would, on the market profile display. So we'll look forward to seeing that shortly. We'll let some of these other morning motions get settled in and see what we have lining up here for this nice Wednesday in front of us.